Pretty rough stretch of games continues for Penn State as the Nittany Lions head to East Lansing in what is typically a very difficult test, but Michigan State having its issues in recent weeks. We've got Tim Aiden on the line from SB Nation's platform for Penn State Black Shoe Diaries. Tim, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. I know people have been some people in the Penn State fan base weren't happy with how the game flow went, but end of the day, being 7-0 and ranked number 6 isn't something I would trade for most other teams' positions.
I agree. Michigan's a talented team. I know that the narrative is that they can't beat ranked teams and haven't for the most part under Jim Harbaugh, and especially on the road, top 10 teams. And you raced out to the 21-0 lead. The second half was less than sterling, and Michigan had a chance to tie it and had a dropped pass by Ronnie Bell in the end zone. So there's that. But on the other hand, regardless of what people say about Michigan football, they're one of the 10 to 15 best teams in the country and most talented teams in the country. And to get a win against a quality opponent, regardless of how it looks, is still the ability to survive. You're not Wisconsin this week, licking your wounds after losing to Illinois. So those things are going to happen all over the country. And as long as you can make it another week, especially against an opponent like Michigan, regardless, yeah, you may be a bit concerned about a few things that happen, but it's another win in the Big Ten and you move on. And now you got Sparty. So before we move on to Michigan State, obviously it was a significant win against Michigan. You were a pretty substantial favorite and looked the part in the first half. So we'll ask you, Tim, to compare the dynamic play where you look like the dominant team versus struggling in the second half and letting Michigan back in the game, and what may be a concern there heading to East Lansing.
Well, that first half, for the first 16 minutes, I should say, when, they looked like absolute world beaters against a Don Brown coach defense, which, I think Don Brown's one of the better coordinators in the country. To be lighting them up the way they were, especially not just through the air, which Clifford was doing with KJ Hamler, but on the ground, I saw Ricky Slade finally have the type of moment that we were hoping he would have throughout the season by this point. He busts a 44-yard run up the middle, which helped set up one of their touchdowns early on. So it was looking like a nice dominant performance from the offense, but I guess credit to Michigan. They adjusted a little and they started to get a little more pressure sooner on Clifford and try to force him into the bad throws. But they did a good job bottling up the run game. That's kind of Don Brown's MO, I feel. They just try to stack the box, take away the run game, just dial up the pressure on you, and they gamble on the fact that they're betting on the fact that your offense, your quarterback won't be able to, find a KJ Hamler or your best playmaker who's going to beat their corners in one-on-one coverage in time to launch one over their secondary before someone from their front seven brings them down. So the beginning, Penn State was able to beat that, and then I think at some point they weren't quite able to do that, and that's when the offense seemed to stall. And the defense, as great as they were playing in that first half, and early on in the second half, I mean, when your offense is continually going 3 and out like they were for that most of that second half, I mean, it doesn't matter how great they are, they're going to tire out. They're going to start missing tackles. They're going to have trouble getting home on the pass rush to the quarterback. So it did have a bit of a snowball effect on the defense too, when the offense couldn't get going. But credit to the offense, credit to Sean Clifford. When the Michigan cut the lead at 21-14, he once again hit his good pal KJ on a deep ball, which made it 28-14, and for the moment at least, staved off that Michigan rally. But again, I mean, credit to Michigan. I think they also made some adjustments offensively for the second half, and Shea was getting little more time to make some throws, or he was doing a good job of evading pressure and then getting the ball to one of his receivers. And poor Ronnie Bell. I mean, I'm glad he dropped the ball, but I remember they showed him on the sidelines afterwards, crying, and so you kind of had to feel for that because I know kind of reminds me of a few years ago at Pitt when Deshaun Hamilton dropped what would have been a game-winning touchdown at against the Panthers. So I've been on both ends of it, but again, it was. I just think Michigan they adjusted well, and Penn State maybe they. I think they just kind of got away from certain things that were working. I think what baffled me the most, though, was the use of the running backs. I was hoping to see more Noah Cain in there, and he only got 5 carries the entire night, and most of those were on the final drive when they successfully ran out the clock after Michigan dropped that what would have been a game time pass in the end zone. But I would have liked to have seen Cain in there, especially when they were up 21-zip early on, and at that point in the game, you just kind of want to, pound the rock a little, try to just beat them into submission, which it looked like they were on the verge of doing. And so it was baffling they didn't put in a guy who's capable of just picking up those chunk yardage on the ground in Noah Cain. Instead, it's continuing to go to that 4-back rotation, which brings in another point. I don't know why they're still doing I understand that they like all their 4 running backs, but again, I think you got to ride at the hot hand, and Cain had been one of the hotter hands the past couple weeks.
Yeah, and they've got a staple of running backs. That is a great luxury to have, and you certainly want to utilize and keep them fresh to a certain extent. But that's what the Maryland game is, and that's what the Rutgers game will be. And to get more distribution and take the pressure off and the workload and the physicality off of the best backs. And, you don't need to use all 4 all the time against the better teams on the schedule. I think you choose the 2 or 3 best, and then you pick out the primary one, and then you go from there. But that's the way James Franklin is approaching it at this point. Got Tim Aiden on the line from Black Shoe Diaries setting us up for the Michigan State game for the Penn State Nittany Lions, now 7-0. Number 3 in my poll. That's the one that counts, Tim. So you're number 3 in the MarkRogersTV Top 25. That actually makes sense because the resume is better than the Clemson and Alabama resumes with wins over Iowa, Michigan, and Pitt. So anyway, the 2 players I would like to spotlight, one is very obvious, and you've known about him, obviously, just like the rest of the players on the roster since the recruiting process, because that's what you do. You're a Penn State fan. You're a writer. You research these guys and know from the recruiting on. For the rest of us, I've certainly known about KJ Hamler for a few years here and have been watching him and amazed by his talent. But I think maybe Saturday night helped him become a national star. He's been somebody because Penn State has been really good, but not playing in the elite games at the end of the year, like in the college football playoff. A lot of people that watch college football at a periphery haven't known about KJ Hamler, but hopefully this performance has put him on the national stage. And also a guy that's a little bit more under the radar, but had an exceptional game and is an emerging star, is Castro-Fields. So just your thoughts about those 2 guys.
Well, KJ, I would say I think he was already kind of a household name, but if he wasn't already, Saturday night definitely made him one without question. Had 108 yards receiving, on 6 catches, 3 touchdowns, or 2 touchdowns, sorry. But he was a big part of that Penn State off. He has been a part of that Penn State offense the whole season, but he was definitely a huge part of it on Saturday night. And I'd say he was the difference. He was the difference maker. And as I said before, when the offense stalled in the second half and Michigan was coming back, he did come up with another clutch play to at least momentarily stave them on, to be just enough in the very end. So he's a guy that Coach Franklin's been saying, James Franklin's been saying in press conferences that they want to get him the ball about 10 to 12 times a game. Now, that's not quite what happened. He touched the ball 7 times. He did have that. he did have a clutch first down run on 3rd and 3 late in the game after Penn State was trying to run out the clock. But so not quite 10-12, but you could tell the staff is making an effort to feed him the rock whenever possible. And and I mentioned before earlier in the broadcast, him and Sean Clifford are very tight, going back to their days as high level recruits and appearing in the same camps. So they had a rapport and chemistry even before they both ended up at Penn State. And now that they're both starters, key members of the offense, you're seeing that dynamic in play. So, and I mean, the thing is too, KJ, as talented as he is, I mean, you could see his. I'm sure his draft stock's probably rising at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see if he decides to come back for another year and have Cliff throw him the ball again, or does he think he's maxed out his draft stock and go to the NFL draft? So it sure would be nice to have him or have those two throw in and catching balls for next year as well. Castro-Fields, very, very gifted athlete, and he's come up with some clutch interceptions this year. I think most notably on Saturday night against when they're at 14-zip, and it was like Shea Patterson wanted to do a screen pass, which is a play that has been like kryptonite to Penn State's defense this year. But kudos to the TCF. He snuffed that out and ended up making an interception, which led to another Penn State score. I think KJ caught a touchdown pass the next play. So he's also been a pretty good tackler in the open field too. Like does a good job not allowing the receiver to pick up much in terms of yards after catch. So he's just so he's just a very tremendous athlete. Very, very good in coverage, and so it's another guy. He's also eligible for the draft after this year, and there's a good chance he could also decide to go pro if his stock is high enough.
Talking Penn State football, we got Tim Maiden on the line from Black Shoe Diaries. Catch him and the rest of the crew there at SB Nation talking Penn State football, and of course an exciting time of year with the Nittany Lions at 7-0, number 6 in the country. The Ohio State game is weeks away, but there's work to be done before that. We see upsets all over the place in college football every week, so you can't just look ahead to the enormous, huge games that everybody's looking at, i.e. Wisconsin, Illinois this past week. So a date at Michigan State is nothing to look past, especially since the Spartans have had your number in recent years. You've had the better team the past 2 years, but they've been able to jump up and bite you. The rainstorm a couple years ago in East Lansing, and then last year they were able to pull out a close one in Happy Valley.
Yeah, like I said, last couple of years, those were games that Penn State could have very much won, and you asked me, they should have won, especially last year. There was zero excuse to lose to Michigan State last year, especially coming off a bye week when you had a chance to get over the loss to Ohio State. You had 2 weeks to get over the loss to Ohio State, and they supposedly had their best week of practice ever around that bye week period. And then they go into the Michigan State game against a team, and that was a Michigan State team that was reeling from injuries. I mean, they were, this wasn't a team at full strength. They were depleted. They didn't have much of a running game. I guess Lorky and Felton Davis could make things happen, but aside from that, they weren't some team that could put up points on you. And defensively, I think they were missing some key guys too. But this is a team that Penn State had no business allowing to hang around the game, and yet that's exactly what happened. Offense looked like hot garbage, and Michigan State did just enough to hang around and give themselves a puncher's chance at the very end, and kind of and I guess it'll bring me back to another theme I noticed this year. But Penn State, they just needed. I think Michigan State punted them about 2 minutes left, and Penn State just needed one first down to put the game away. And Mark D'Antonio was gambling on the fact that Penn State's offense as for playing as pro as they were that day, they would not be able to pick up that first down. And sure enough, that's what happened. They went 3 and out. They punted back. And on that last drive, I believe Amani and Warrior dropped what would have been a game-winning interception, hit him right in the numbers, and couldn't hang on to it. And then a couple plays later, Blue Orky hits Felton Davis on the sideline. Davis broke a tackle from Amani and raced to the end zone for the game-winning touchdown. So, as I said, they gave themselves a puncher's chance, and they took full advantage of it. And what I noticed, though, this year, I guess what can give me a little bit of hope if the game is the ugly, low-scoring battle I think it's going to be again, the last 2 weeks, Penn State's demonstrated the ability now to close out opponents to pick up that first down or two that they need to not have to punt the ball back to their opponent and give them one final chance to win the game. So I'm hoping, I hope it doesn't come down to that. I hope Penn State can win, by a couple scores, but they find themselves in a similar situation for the third week in a row. I'm hopeful this time around they can might be able to close it out, but we'll see. I think I have some PTSD from these last couple of years playing Sparty to be too optimistic, but that's one thing that gives me some hope going into this year.
Well, I was running some numbers over the last decade, and it's I basically proved what I thought before I ran the numbers, and that's that, and this was prior to the Michigan State-Wisconsin game, that those have been the second and third best programs over the last decade to Ohio State in the Big Ten. Ohio State's only lost 9 games since Urban Meyer showed up, and then you've got a group of Michigan State, Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan is expected between 25 and 33 losses, and Wisconsin's got the second best record in the league, but Michigan State's right there as well. But it's a program on the downturn right now. They've lost 3 horrible games, not to the opponents, considering Ohio State and Wisconsin are really good, but they got blasted by both of them. Also lost a game to Arizona State, in which they only scored a touchdown as a 15-point favorite. So it's a Michigan State team that comes in a bit battered and bloodied, that was supposed to come back with the senior team and challenge possibly for an Eastern Division title, but doesn't appear that they're going to be able to accomplish that. And so they're just winning and playing for pride at this point, as they welcome Penn State as a 5.5-point dog to the Nittany Lions, a team that's got a whole lot to play for. Tim, we're up against it, but we appreciate you stopping by. As always, setting us up for Penn State football. It doesn't look like an enormous game on the schedule, but again, we are reminded every week with upsets across the country, and it's only a 5.5-point game by Vegas, that it could be a tricky one on the road at East Lansing, where a lot of teams have gone and blown their season against Mark D'Antonio.
Well, certainly. I'm hopeful. I'm hoping, I should say, I'm not hopeful, but I'm hoping this time it's a little different in Penn State's favor. But you never know. They got the bye week to heal up, lick their wounds, and Penn State's coming off a tough finish against Michigan. So, we'll see. I'm sure the players and Franklin certainly haven't forgotten what's happened last year or the year before. So I'm sure there's going to be there'll be a team on a mission, but again, this is a circle the wagons type game for Mark D'Antonio and his team too. So I expect a tight, low scoring battle. That's all I'm going to say for now. I'm not ready to make a prediction just yet.
All right, Tim, it's always appreciated. Enjoy the game. We'll see you soon.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.